This is the second lecture on the series of lectures that we are having for rural surgeons, which is arranged by the International Federation of Rural Surgeons. In the last lecture, we studied about cystometrogram or bladder pressure studies and how a variety of symptoms can be interpreted using the findings of the cystometrogram. This, combined with the cystoscopy diagnosis, helps to identify the cause of most of the urology problems. We discussed last time that almost 5 to 6% of the OPD patients who present to any remote areas would have urology problems, and more than half of them could be diagnosed with these two simple procedures. And what do we mean by cystoscopy? Basically, this is an instrument or equipment which is used to have a look inside the bladder and the urethra, which connects outside to the urinary bladder. And for many decades, we had only the rigid cystoscope, which is the picture that you see on top. This consists of three parts. One is the outer sheath, then the bridge and the telescope, and there is a channel for working. And in recent times, people have developed a flexible cystoscope. This is a very tiny tube, and this allows cystoscopy when the patient is lying down, not in lithotomy position as we normally do for rigid scopy. But then this is about 2 or 3 times more expensive than the rigid scope. And the last one you see is the cystoscope that we have developed. It's a very low cost scope which directly connects to the laptop computer and gives the pictures on the screen. So what are the indications for cystoscopy? The most common and important indication is hematuria or blood in the urine. And in men over 60 years, even if there is microscopic hematuria, it is significant. Or even if they have any history of hematuria, all these warrant cystoscopy, because the earlier you diagnose conditions like a bladder tumor or urothelial tumors in the ureter or kidneys, it is much easier to treat. So any hematuria or any history of hematuria is an indication. And then the most common indication for cystoscopy is the lower urinary tract symptoms. These are again divided into two groups, obstructive symptoms and irritative symptoms. Obstructive symptoms are hesitancy. Once you start initiating the process of passing urine, it takes a little while for the urine to come out, because the bladder has to generate sufficient pressure. In men, it's about 60 centimeter, in women about 40 centimeter, before the sphincter opens and the urine comes out. And then when there is a block, the urinary streams again become small. When it progressively keeps on becoming smaller, then you reach a stage where there is intermittency. The stream goes up and down because the bladder muscles are not able to generate sufficient contractile power to complete micturition. And then finally, it reaches a stage where the voiding is incomplete. Even after you pass urine, quite a bit of urine left behind in the bladder. And the irritative voiding symptoms are basically increased frequency. It is more noticeable, or it occurs earlier in the night, and it's called nocturia. And then the daytime frequency increases. And finally, there is some dysuria, discomfort while passing urine. And also there may be urgency, because once you have a desire to pass urine, they need to run to the toilet or bathroom. Then the other symptoms are probably due to things like stricture, where the urinary stream becomes thin. So here the difference between obstruction due to prostate or stricture is that in prostate, the straining does not improve the stream. While in a stricture, because of the actual narrowing, straining will improve the stream. And then there may be what we call urinary incontinence. So this can be two types. One is stress incontinence. This occurs when the bladder is full. And when the patient is coughing or anything which increases the abdominal pressure. And then continuous dribbling occurs if there is an overflow into incontinence. The bladder is full and can't hold any more urine. Okay. And we are discussing about cystoscopy being part of other procedures. Like we generally combine cystomatogram and cystoscopy so that it gives a complete clear picture of what the diagnosis is. And sometimes we can use cystoscopy as part of staging procedures for cancers to see if the bladder is involved, or if you're doing a sling operation or corpus suspension surgery and so on. Or if you're doing procedures like DJ stenting, where cystoscopy is a preliminary requirement. And this being an invasive procedure, it's important to take a proper informed consent. Always there will be some mild burning and there may be a little bit of bleeding because urothelium is quite fragile. And despite giving antibiotics, it's possible to have infection, especially if there is residual urine. And there are instances where even catheters can cause trauma and injury and strictures. So it's important to be very gentle during the procedures and also get consent for all these procedures. Then we give prophylactic antibiotics, especially in a rural setting, because we don't want to take any chances with the infection. So generally what is used is either aminoglycosic acid alone, like gentamicin, or amikacin, which is a little more expensive, or cephalosporins. Sometimes if there is a strong suspicion of infection, you can give third generation cephalosporin and aminoglycosic acid together. Some people prefer just something like a ciprofloxacillin, which is a fluoroquinolone. Then the preparation is important, especially if you're doing a rigid cystoscopy. The patient has to be placed in a proper lithotomy position. And cleaning and raping is done as per any surgical procedure. And it's important to start cleaning from the urethra and go away from the urethra because that's the area where infection can get in. And it's also useful to remember the anus is located fairly close to the urethra. And any gauze piece, even if it has beta, then once it touches the anus, then it should be discarded. And with urology, one other thing we had to always keep in mind is that the wet drapes are not sterile anymore. So you have to keep the drapes dry or waterproof. And in women, it's generally possible to do the procedure under local anesthesia. While a spinal anesthesia is preferable for men, especially if you're starting the procedures. But once with the experience, it is possible to do them under local anesthesia. So as we briefly mentioned, the classical cystoscope has 3 parts. The most expensive important part is the telescope, which is generally what we use is 30 degrees telescope for viewing the bladder and a 0 degree for viewing the urethra. Then there is a bridge. This bridge has an opening for passing the various instruments that we use, like the biopsy forceps or grasper and so on. And also there is a place for connecting the light cord. So you need a telescope, you need a bridge, you need a light source, you need a light cord. Then if you're not directly looking through the telescope, then you need a camera and monitor for the entire setup. And if you're using a camera, it's important to make sure that the 12 o'clock position is placed correctly. So normally what we do is with the left hand, we hold the camera with the 12 o'clock right on top. And then you can rotate the scope either this way or that way to look at the 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock position and the varying level. But if you're not careful with this holding it correctly, then your orientation is difficult. But again, another thing to remember is that it is important to lubricate well and pass the instrument under vision. And any force can cause damage and stricture. So you need to be very gentle while doing the scoping. And even though the bladder is a small area, it's good to have a systematic way of looking around. So you look at the bladder neck and then look at the interureteric ridge or Mercius bar, then the ureteric orifices on either side, then the lateral walls on either side, then the dome of the bladder and anterior wall. If you do it in a systematic and a routine way, you will not miss. And this is important, especially if there is a malignancy. The recurrences are very small, and the earlier you detect, the better it is. And now these are some of the conditions that you'll see when you're doing the cystoscopy. In the urethra, strictures look like this. So normally the diameter is about 1 centimeter. But here, if you look at it, it's hardly a millimeter. And the reason is that when it starts becoming small, when there is any damage, the scar tissues form. And they progressively keep on becoming smaller. And the symptoms don't occur till it reaches about 1/3 the normal size. And then by the time the patient comes and repeated infection and so on, will make it more and more small, and finally you can even go into retention. And this is how bladder outflow obstruction will look. What you see in either side is the 2 lobes of the prostate. And right on top may be a small area which goes into the bladder neck. This enlargement can also be either bilobar when 2 lobes enlarged like this, as you see in the picture, or trilobar when the lower portion also is here bulge. And you need to understand and locate the verumontanum and see how the prostate looks beyond the veru. Then the next important landmark that you need to identify is the ureteric orifice. So normally as you enter the bladder, it's fairly easy to locate the bladder neck. And then if you view from the bladder neck, then you'd see a raised elevated bar, which is the interureteric ridge. And once you go laterally, then you come to the orifices on either side. It's a slit-like opening, and when it's closed, it may be difficult to see it. So when that happens, you need to wait for a while till the peristalsis come and they open the orifice. And sometimes if there is a condition like ureterocele or a stone, the orifice might not be easily visible. Then another thing you need to look for is trabeculations and saccules. So these are long-standing obstruction or neurovesical dysfunction. There is hypertrophy of the muscle, and these interlacing fibers can be seen. And the mucosa goes between the muscle fibers to form these saccules. But the most important reason for doing a scopy, especially if there is hematuria, blood in the urine, is to diagnose transitional cell carcinoma of the bladder. These present quite early because they bleed, and it's easy to identify blood in the urine. And as long as the cancer stays within the muscles, inside the mucosa, it has a very good prognosis. And but then the other problem is that it is multicentric, so it can occur anywhere in the bladder at any time. So regular follow-up and scopies are important for TCC. And of course, these are conditions which may not be very common, like vesicovaginal fistula. Here there is continuous leak of urine through the vagina, and you can either scope from the vagina or from the bladder to locate the orifice. And tuberculosis is a condition which is common in LMICs, and many of them can mimic almost any disease. So even in the bladder, it can mimic malignancies or can cause fibrosis. And long-standing disease, it causes what is called a thimble bladder, or the bladder becomes very, very small. Another common finding is the vesical calculus. They can be primary calculus, which come from the kidney and then drop down and start growing in the bladder. Or because of the stasis or obstruction due to BPH, they can develop in the bladder. And sometimes it's difficult to see because the small stones can go and hide in the diverticulum. So you need to fill the bladder, empty the bladder 2-3 times to make sure that there are no stones.